Hello, everyone. My name is Wes Christian, CEO of School Food Handler. And boy, do we have a show for you today. We have got Miss Lindsay Hill on the show today. She is the CEO and founder of MenuLogic K-12. And they have got just some amazing software that helps districts literally find money without doing any extra work. It is the coolest thing. And I cannot wait for her to share a little bit more about this amazing product and the awesome work that they're doing over at MenuLogic. So without further ado, let's dive into today's chat, and let's introduce the woman of the hour. Lindsay Hill, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Wes. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's a pleasure to have you here. And I can't wait to talk to you and learn more about you and introduce you to our audience. And then also have the opportunity to chat about your company, MenuLogic, for a little bit, which if folks out there haven't heard of MenuLogic, you are in for a real treat today. Lindsay has started an amazing company, and I'm going to let her share a little bit more about that over the course of today. But before we jump into that, I'd love for folks that maybe have not had the opportunity to meet you at a conference or, or just around in the school nutrition industry. I'd love to, kind of get to know you a little bit more, Lindsay, before we kind of jump into things. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, awesome. Well, to kind of kick things off, would you mind sharing a little bit more about what got you into school nutrition, what your background looks like, and then ultimately kind of what drove you to start your company, MenuLogic?
Sure. So I'm a registered dietitian by trade. So directly out of my dietetic internship years ago, 17 years ago, I went directly into my role as a school nutrition director. So I was a 23-year-old director in a district here I'm based in Indiana, figuring things out. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I loved food service and I knew I loved child nutrition. So learned to love child nutrition at least. So fast forward all these years, all the years as a director, it's been my life's work. I mean, everything about school nutrition, the collaboration, the goal at the end of the day is feeding kids. I mean, who else gets a job that has such a, wonderful outcome? And I guess in my role, I'm always been a technology person. That was my first major before I switched to dietetics in college. So I've always been interested in technology and how it can make things work better and work faster and work more effectively. So I kept thinking, over time, the business side of school nutrition has always been a passion of mine too. So I'm thinking I'm 23 years old and I'm in charge of a multi-million-dollar budget and no one's helping me with this.
So stressful.
Okay, I'm not exactly sure what to do, but I can, I always review what has been done before and kind of monitor what's happening now and hopefully don't screw anything up too badly. So, I'm thinking how do I make these are all my decisions that are affecting whether or not kids ultimately there's enough money to feed children the type of the higher quality level of food that I wanted to. So I just kept trying technologies okay, I have this point of sale system, I have this menu planning system, or I have all these systems that have all this data, and yet I'm here guessing all the time. How much does this cost? How much should it cost? How much should I charge for that? Does anybody even like that food that I'm serving? How, and it's then as my team grew, the problem became more complex. When I first started, it was just me. So the problem became more complex as I added people to my team. I'm thinking they're asking me these questions. What should it cost? What should this be? And it's I don't really know. At the end of the day, I just want to have enough money to serve awesome food and everyone be happy. That's my goal. So anyway, so I tried different technology and realized it didn't exist, and then got this crazy idea to start a company and hire some developers and build version 1 of MenuLogic because I wanted to use it myself. I never got into this. I mean, I think that's really different from, I don't know, I didn't get into this for any reason other than I felt it truly needed to exist for school nutrition teams and the people and kids that they serve. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just so curious. You mentioned coming into the industry as a 23-year-old kid. I mean, there have been so many young kids that have joined the industry in the past couple of years. There's a lot of new directors that are young. What was that like for you? And I mean, obviously, there's so much to learn in the school nutrition industry. I think people on the outside look at school nutrition as, being a pretty simple, organization, but it's so not simple at all. It's so complex. So what were some things that maybe you learned early on, maybe some mentors that you had that were, really influential in your, kind of early career? What is maybe some advice that you would give to new young directors in the industry that are just like you were, just trying to figure things out right now?
Sure. I think looking back, I mean, I think a lot of times people get tripped up. Of course, we have to understand the regulations. The regulations are important. Like, I'm a big rule follower, don't get me wrong, but the regulations, what I learned over time and what I truly believe in, like, that's not our end all be all. That's just the rules we have to abide by. That's not the rules that we have to live by. So, like, challenge yourself to learn that part quickly and then push past that to say, like, how can I work under these parameters but be awesome for kids? Like, how can we push past that? So no, don't get me wrong, that's like easier said than done because the regulations are super complicated. But I had a lot of asking questions of multiple people from multiple facets of the industry. I mean, that's one of the coolest things about this industry. It's so collaborative. Like, everybody's willing to share. So it's like not only sharing with directors, but like vendors. Like, I mean, the mentors that I had from the vendor side are equally as many as the ones from the other directors. You're learning, like, how does this equipment how does this equipment industry work? Like, what's a manufacturer? What's a broker? Like, how does this really work? Because deeply understanding that is going to help you do your job better. Like, I'm not worried about procurement only from a rule standpoint. I'm worried from an effective standpoint, or, menu planning from a rules standpoint. Check the rules off. Now let's see how we can strategize and make it better. But yeah, I had some really, I guess, from a school nutrition director standpoint, I had a woman named Julie Becker. She's the one who co-authored the Orange Book that everybody studies for
Really?
on the SNS exam. I have a signed copy right here. You'll have to grab it. This book, I think everybody will recognize it.
Oh yeah, look at that.
But Julie is a dear mentor of mine, and she's from Indiana, and early on going to like the state association shows, and I went to every PD session I could possibly go to. I was super involved in then planning PD at the state level, but meeting Julie through that, and she was one of the first people I met that gave a session on menu engineering. So like, I think early on, I just felt like this is what I should be doing. That makes sense to me. But like, how can I possibly do that without, I don't know. So she's one. And then I had another mentor, and her name's Gina DeSutter, and she's a business owner. She owned a signage company and design company. And I just learned so much from like the merchandising and marketing, and a woman owning her own business. And so kind of mentors from both sides.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I love hearing about people's stories and how they got into the industry, because it's always different. So, some people, they got into the industry just by accident, but they fell into it, and I've heard it jokes before that the school nutrition is kind of like the mafia. Once you get in, you can't get out. Yeah. And so it is so true though. People they catch the bug, and they get in for whatever their reason is, and they end up staying in the industry for many years. So it's really cool hearing, how other people get into the industry and kind of fall into it. I want to go back to what you mentioned about, really kind of the way that you went about developing MenuLogic. And, you mentioned that you were kind of struggling with getting some of that data-driven information that you were looking for as far as your menus were concerned. And I want to know kind of what the process looked like before and what the process looks like now that MenuLogic is out there and available for folks.
Sure. From just like a high level summary view, I feel like if you're using whatever system you're using for menu planning, whether it's a software, whether it's a spreadsheet, whether it's a piece of paper, like, it doesn't matter. Like, what you're doing is you're putting this combination of items together that have all of these parameters that you have to consider, whether it's nutrition, cost, price, whatever. Like, it's this combination of things that everyone's goal is, let's make this compliant, right? Like, let's make it compliant, and let's make it something that kids want to eat. So by the time you get through all of that effort, then where's the measurement? Like, where is the measurement of success as to whether that menu that you just put all that time putting together, like, it's not like, was it received the way you wanted it to be received, and did it
Mm.
meet the financial parameters that you need it to meet? And without tools to help you effectively monitor that, I think we do a lot of guessing in this industry. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, or we do a lot of subjective asking. So like what I had to rely on before is, okay, let's do like a menu meeting. I don't know. Like, menu meetings, just like so many years of menu meetings. It's like you're meeting with your team and you're like, what should we change about this menu? The kids don't like this. The kids don't like this. And you only have the 2 or 3 managers that speak up, and everyone else just sits there silent. I'm sure others can relate. So it's like the loudest gets that's where you tend to gravitate, because they're the only
Hmm.
ones giving you any information to go from. So I guess where MenuLogic flips this is, let's go into those meetings way more prepared. Like,
Oh yeah.
we already know week 2 Tuesday is terrible. Like, it's not good. Like, we're losing money on it every time. Like, what do you want to see that we can switch it out? Let's not like throw the whole menu up in the air and start over. Let's just fix the problems and maximize the successes.
Yeah.
So I guess from a like overall standpoint, the idea is, do what you want to do as long as you have a tool by your side to manage, to effectively help you monitor that what you're doing is working,
Yeah,
and point you in the
absolutely.
direction of what you should be doing. Because like, that's the other thing about me. Like, I hate wasting time. Like, I want to do things as quickly and effectively as possible, and like pouring through, like, I've built so many spreadsheets, and like I've tried to do this so many different ways, and it's like I finally hit the point where I'm like, this is not a humans cannot solve this. Like, it's too much data. It's too much data points to consider, too much quantity of data to be meaningful. Like, something needs to combine it all in a way I can understand it as a human and actually do
Yeah.
something with it. Otherwise, what's the point?
From an outside perspective, menus and food is not something that we really look at from from my company, School Food Handler side of things. We're very involved with training and education, but menus is something that's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So hearing you talk about the challenges, I mean, I can totally understand how difficult that could be, and it's honestly hard for me to wrap my mind around sometimes. So as far as collecting this data, how does MenuLogic go about actually getting this information to then go and analyze for districts?
Yeah, so I mean, the cool thing about the idea, like the light bulb moment for me, like back in the day, was we already are collecting this data on the production record. Like, the production record is an incredibly valuable source of information that we have to do every day for one of these regulations. So like, the biggest thing that frustrates me about the regulations is like, let's do things. I get why we're doing these things, but like, let's get something back out of them that actually helps kids, which is why the regulations were put in place in the first place. So
Yeah.
it's like, they have this production record that, I get it, like, we have to do to prove that we're being compliant and the government is investing their money in us appropriately and all of these things. But like, why are we just letting it sit there? Like, let's not let it sit there in a binder, or let it sit there in a software that is just reading you out, like giving you a PDF. Like, that doesn't do you any good. Like not only like, so anyway, so we basically have created like, what's the fastest way to get this? Because like, I don't want people to have to like redo their entire tech system. I've done that.
Hmm.
I've built a back of house system in 3 different softwares over 10 years. I've changed POS 3 different times. Like, it's a massive undertaking.
Oh
And
yeah.
the number one thing for me was like, I want this to be achievable for anyone. Like, we can't take 3 years to get to a solution. And like, at what cost? Like, at what cost is your time? Like, what else could you be doing that during that 3 years? So anyway, so we go straight to the production record data. Like, all we're asking for, you don't have to redo your recipes with us. You don't have to redo your point of sale. And we make that initial move as easy as possible. Like, we're saying, all we're asking for is, give us your menus, give us your production records, give us your item information. We'll help you cost it even. Because that's another thing we found. Like, a lot of people just don't even have time to cost out their menu items.
Mm.
Like, we'll help you get that. Let us be your system of record for this information. We'll get it all in, your menus up and running. And all we're asking for you to do is to do the production record with us.
Yeah.
Like, that's all you need to do to get you this like massive amount of information in a way that you can put it back into use and make your menu stronger, which will make your program stronger.
So I want to talk about production records real quick because you mentioned a second ago of just the value and it being, so important to school districts, that particular report that, we're supposed to be doing every single day. But yet I feel like there are so many districts that we work with and I hear them just preaching you got to do the production records, you got to do the production records. And I feel like in some places, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I feel like some places they just kind of go through the motions and they don't really take a whole lot of diligent focus on doing the production records. It's kind of just like, popping down some numbers here and there. So talk to me about the importance, really the genuine importance of a production record, not just from a compliance standpoint, but from just the information that's collected on it and the value of that information and what that information specifically leads to from an administrative level and how it really trickles down throughout the entire organization.
Sure. I love talking about production records. I've spent like the last, I don't even know, like I think I've dived more into production records and talked to so many managers and directors and anyway, but so I love talking about it. So thank you. Okay. So what the production record is at its core is it's a listing of every single menu item that you sold, condiments, like anything that was sold out of your cafeteria, line item by line item. And you're saying, I planned this many, I prepared this many, I served this many in meals, I served this many in a la carte, and I had this many left over. Did I waste it or did I not? Oh, and by the way, that came with this supply. That's the record. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if you think about everything that's associated with that, like let's talk about it from the director level. Like right now, I think most directors are like, well, we just make sure you're doing a production record right. So that way when we get audited, like they're ready and everything's good. Like that's the extent of what most directors think about it because there's nothing else to do with it. Like, right. Or like, if you're planning menus and you're saying like, oh, okay, so if I'm going to plan a menu and I'm going to project how much of each item I'm going to serve and how I'm going to serve it, the only tool for you to make those decisions is pouring through snapshot production records. Like what is that going to do? Like, and how good is that projection going to be? Like, okay, the cost of this meal is $1.50, but it's all guessing projections. Like, and you're supposed to just manually review that. Like, I mean, anyway. So, but what the production record could lead to, if you think about it from the director level, like if you tie revenue and expenses together, that now it's giving you cost, revenue, and profitability. That's the difference. So like, just because you had a high revenue, like if you think of like a single instance of a production record, lunch today, did I make money on lunch or did I not? Considering labor, overhead, and the cost of the food served. Nobody knows that. Like we know that with we know that that's what we're doing in MenuLogic is we're saying like this production record was or wasn't profitable or wasn't popular. And then you have all the details to dive into to see why. Like that one item was a super high waste, or this item you didn't sell as many is much higher in profitability because you sell more a la carte. Like the decision to put the hamburger on the menu affects not only what was sold in meals, but was sold a la carte. But you know what I'm saying? So from the director level, there's all this wealth of information, like all of that. But then from the manager level, let's not forget that. Like this is what they're using every day to do their job.
Yeah.
I mean, the decisions that the managers are tasked with are massive. And given what I've done here and my role as a director, like I've sat with many of my managers and I've sat with managers from other districts and I've said, like, show me how you're doing your job. Like, how are you doing this? Like, how are you making these decisions? And the number of like Post-it notes and papers and packets and like adding machine tapes and like the decision is how much food should I make and how do I make sure I have enough ingredients to prepare the food and the people to make the food. Like that's the decision, right? Yeah. But like deciding to make the wrong amount is either going to lead to the number one problem, kids aren't getting, the food that they wanted to pick or their first choice. And the number two problem is too much waste. So like, how do you balance that effectively? So anyway, so like just giving projections and tools to the managers to make their production stronger. That's another thing that we're just really passionate about. So if a system can tell the manager like, hey, on week 2 Tuesday, you sold this much of this item, like right there where you have to make the decision, like you just cut out like an hour and a half of their day that like they are manually trying to figure that information out. So accuracy, effort, all those things.
That's really cool. So you're literally helping districts find money, it sounds like.
Yes. Oh my God. The amount. Oh yeah. Okay. Like I could go on that. Like we're in a weird time right now, I think. And this is like what, September of 2023. Okay. So when I first started this, like menus were simpler, first of all. Like
Hmm.
there weren't as many line items on a menu. We had pretty predictable reimbursements from rate increases from one year to the next. The cost of labor and food and supplies was not near what it is now. So then we get into like the last couple of years where it's like we went from like no money to this money to supply chain assistant funds to this to people are sitting on, some districts are sitting on these large fund balances, and they're like, I'm hearing it all the time, like, how do we how do we use this money? But the problem is like you can't commit to a menu that costs twice as much as what your menu did before, because that money is not
Right.
going to last forever. So like if the government is listening, if you want to give us money in the form of a reimbursement rate that we know we can count on, and then
Hmm.
we can up the quality of what we're serving, and up the cost point of that. So
Yeah, so my son just started going to TK this year, and he's got his little backpack. He gets on the bus and rides it to school in the morning. Like he's so excited because he's finally a big kid. But every single day, him and his cousins, they all come home and they talk about how they didn't eat lunch. And we're like, well, why didn't you guys eat lunch today? And inevitably, the menu looks the same every single month. It's literally the same items every single month. There's really not much variation to it. But from, my kids and then my nieces, they all say that most of the kids just throw the food in the garbage, unfortunately. So, I mean, they're just trashing it. And it sounds like with MenuLogic, that would give the school district here that my kids go to more information about what items are not getting consumed, what items are getting trashed. So how can we supplement those with additional items? Did I understand that right?
yeah, so we're basically tracking participation. So
Hmm.
did the students choose to purchase this item or not? But those participation numbers are going to tell you the story as to whether they accept it or not. Like I tell the story of like, if you're not monitoring the menu's performance, like you can have these days that like the principals are talking about it, the parents are talking about it, the teachers are talking about it, and they're like, why are they still serving that? Like no
Yeah.
one's buying this. But unless something's alerting you to, hey, this day is bad, like do something about it before it's too late. Like that's
Hmm.
the kind of information that we're trying to provide, is like, don't look bad because you're not reacting appropriately to what the market is telling you.
Yeah.
And the kids are telling you they don't like this. So respond and figure out, try to, you can also, if you have a monitoring tool, you can also try new things and say, all right, that combination worked, this combination didn't. But if you're just guessing over and over and over again, like, I don't know, it's just like, it's a waste of time. It's a
Hmm.
waste of time without
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah. I'm curious to know what your thoughts on, participation, yes, but specifically, like I mentioned, there's a lot of schools that are struggling with, just waste and kids not eating lunch at all. I mean, they're serving it, but they're not eating it. What do you think the answer is to that? Just from a school nutrition director's perspective.
I think increasing the quality of not only the food but the relationships, I
Mm,
think that's a big part of it. Like, if who wants to, I always strived for, how can we up the quality, how can we feel like we're serving the highest quality food that students are going to enjoy in an environment they want to be in. And like I
mm,
think all of those things matter. Like, you and I, like, we don't go to a restaurant, they may have the best food in the world, but like if the people are mean and it's gross and you don't want to be there,
you're not gonna go.
I'm out. Like I
Yeah.
don't want to be here, and I don't want to eat what they're serving me.
Hmm.
So I think it's more than the food. And I think it's, again, like I don't want to oversimplify the regulations, but I think sometimes that's an excuse that like we can strive to be better. Like we can strive to do the best that we possibly can do, but that includes evaluating yourself and your program and identifying your weaknesses and taking the time to do something about it. Talk to students, talk to your team. Like that's what I say. Like look at the data and let that drive your story, and then talk to people about like how, like, what is the problem? Like, why aren't you consuming this food? Like, why is that? Why is it going in the trash? Because that's definitely not what any of us want. Like, of
Sure.
course, we want kids to consume the food. Like, that's the whole point of all of this. So, yeah.
I'm just curious to know because I mean we've talked a couple of times in the past, and you kind of have referenced yourself as kind of like a finance nerd in school nutrition, and I'd love to get your opinion on something. So from a finance standpoint, I've talked to a lot of districts, and I've seen a lot of districts go through the hills and the valleys of financial, I guess, security over the past 5-10 years. For districts that might be struggling financially in the current year, what are some suggestions that you have for how to turn their budgets around? What are some things, some quick wins that they can do, some things that they should look for, red flags maybe that they can be on the lookout for in the future? From your perspective, I'd love to know kind of your thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, I think the very first place you start is understanding from a high level, like how much money am I bringing in on an annual level projected, and how much money am I spending? That's step one, right? And when I first started, like, I think that's how I became this like person that is really interested in all this. When I started at my district, I didn't even get month-end reports. Like, I didn't get reports. They were 6 months behind. And I'm like, I'm signing off on checks for thousands and thousands of dollars, and I have no clue like what's happening right now. So I started with just like making my own spreadsheet. But I basically, like, when we would log, but like I kept it simple, and it was like, okay, I'm going to log how much food did we spend, and how much labor went out, and how much, I mean, that's really the buckets you have to look at. Like, you have the revenue umbrella, and then we have food, supplies, labor, and overhead. So the next step after that, if you want to make a big impact, look at your highest, what's the biggest percentage of your pie? Like, if your revenue is $5 million and food is 3 million of that, or 4 million of that, like, that's your biggest opportunity. Like, the food you put, not only is the food you put on a menu the opportunity from an expense standpoint, but it's also a revenue generator. So like, your pie can get bigger, the piece of the pie can get smaller, and that just widens that margin, which you might not even have a margin at all if you're not looking at that. So I mean, that's definitely where I would start. But the other side of that is labor. Like, I mean, I've seen districts that, like a new the pay rates get increased with everybody else in the district, and nobody's considering the school nutrition budget. But if your labor percent of that revenue pie is like 60, 70%, there's no percent left for anything else. That's never going to work. So like, the step one is you're going to have to get that labor down under 40, 50% for it to even have enough money to spend on everything else. So I mean, that's definitely where I would start. Budgeting doesn't have to be, there's a lot of people that don't have a budget. Like I wasn't required to make a budget in my district. I just did. And honestly, that probably came from my, like, I didn't do it until like 6 or 7 years into my job, because I was like, I'm tired of worrying about this. And from a personal finance level, like, I love having a budget just means like, I don't have to be worried about this anymore. Like, as long as I'm under what I need to be under, and like, cool, like, that's all I need to know. So I mean, I think definitely, like, don't get too overwhelmed with the idea of this budget doesn't have to be super complicated. Like, it can be a very high level spreadsheet view, and then once you know where you're at and which direction to go, you can get the tools that help you along the way to monitor it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like a budget is like your financial roadmap in a way. It's just, it kind of directs your decision making and allows you a lot more peace of mind, I feel like.
And it is super complicated, because like, it's not like, okay, so like, if you're looking at your home budget and you say, I spend this much a month on groceries, you can't say that in school nutrition. The more you sell, the more you spend. So like, how do you manage those variable costs? It's like incredibly difficult to know, you have to spend money to make money, but you don't want to spend more than what you're making. So like, those were the questions I asked myself, that I was like, I can't do this without a tool. Like, that's why we created this. Like, I just need to know that at the end of the day, we can serve what we want to serve. And if it doesn't work out, we change it before we repeat it 100 times. Like,
Oh yeah.
it just gives you a lot of freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I feel like it's so important, just simply because the industry changes so frequently. I mean, if you just rewind, 10 years and you look at all the changes that that we've gone through, and then rewind another 10 years, and I mean, it's night and day what it was 20 years ago. I'm actually curious, if you had a magic wand and you could, influence the future of child nutrition, what's your version of the future look like in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the rest of the world, it's going to become more automated. It's going to become more reliant on, the labor force, especially a skilled labor force, and the resources it takes to get you to have a skilled labor force. Like that's an incredible challenge right now, and like I don't see that getting any better. So anything that we can do to leverage technology to make our jobs easier and faster. So like Chat GPT, I know everybody's talking about it, but like I like that's going to change the world. It already
Yeah.
has, right? Like why, we can have suggestions and like tools that help us along the way to make these really, really important big decisions and better, or make our day to day, we all have this like bucket of things we have to do every day that are like not that important, but you still have to do them. Like, how can we do those things faster so you get to the high impact? Like, that's where we need to spend our time, is the high impact. Like, do these little things faster so that you can get to those bigger outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that, automation and technology is kind of what you see in the future for the next 10 years, because I've talked to a lot of directors and just school nutrition professionals in today, and a lot of them are still very hesitant of technology, or they're very cautious to implement new tools because they don't feel like their team are going to be able to handle them or be able to, adopt them easily. For directors out there that are maybe in that position where they're maybe a little tech shy, or they feel like their employees aren't going to be able to handle it because their employees are tech shy, what do you say to those people? What are suggestions that you have on, ways to implement technology in a successful manner in a school district?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's definitely working in our favor. So I'll tell a story from like my early years in this job. But one of the first things when I walked into this district when I was 23, they said we bought a new point of sale system, and at that time it was like literally like a box of software like on the shelf. Like everybody had been talking about this point of sale system for like a year. Everyone, my whole team was just terrified. They're like, "It's coming. She's here now. Now we're actually going to do it. It's coming." So I spent like the first 6 months like learning. I implemented that software with that team, and I could not have had a more effective bonding experience than I
Mm,
did. Like I literally held the hand of one of my managers and taught her how to use a mouse. Like we've come a long way from that. I
yeah.
mean, like a long way. Like manager, like the people coming into these manager roles are younger and like they're used to technology. They're expecting technology. And if you manage the process appropriately, like it doesn't have to be as scary in terms of like, but like I understand, like I've been through some really bad implementation. And like I think that's where the fear comes from,
Yeah.
is like it's really hard to change point of sale. Like it is. Like it affects literally every part of your business. And I don't even know that the best company in the world could solve that entire problem for you. It's
Yeah.
just really weird. So I mean, I guess that's kind of the way we look at it, is like we're not asking you to change all of that. We're asking you to change a small part of it, and we certainly want to keep eyes on the value of that change is immense. Like it's worth a tiny bit of pain for a massive new way of doing things that's going to make your life way better after the fact. So
Yeah, I think that's so cool what you said about really looking at it as kind of like a bonding
yeah.
experience, because I feel like so many people that I have conversations with, they just want it to just kind of throw it in there and just have it just magically work without them having to really do anything to implement it. And I think that's a big problem I've seen in the past, where people will procure a new tool, a new software, a new point of sale, and they just want it to just just work, and they don't want to do the heavy lifting in the beginning to make it effective in the long run. And it's that kind of short-term pain for long-term gain. And if they kind of shifted that mindset and looked at it as, hey, look, this is an opportunity for me to bring our team closer together. We're going to struggle, we're going to cry maybe, but it's going to be a learning experience, and we're all going to be better off for it in the long run. I think that's a really cool kind of mind shift to kind of look at things.
Yeah, I mean, I was in my district for a long time, and I had the same set of managers for like almost 10 years. So you almost get to a point where it's like, what do we have to talk about at this point? You know what I mean? Like let's have something that we can all talk about together that we can collaborate on together effectively, and like a new project to work through together. I mean, I don't know. So whether you're in the beginning or you're in the middle or the end of your career, like it's just something that everybody can like rally around, I guess.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, as we kind of get close to the end of our time here and kind of wrap things up for the day, I want to ask you one final question before we take off. If you could put a message, a sticky note, an item on a bulletin board, a message on a billboard on the side of the freeway for the whole world to see, or maybe just for school nutrition every single day, if you could put a note inside of every single kitchen across the entire United States, what would your message say to everyone?
Well, I'm not going to come up with anything short. I can tell you that. I think just be good, like be kind, care about the outcome of what we're doing every day, and like always keep that in your focus. That was always something with my team that's like, if we've spent more than this amount of time on something, I would stop and say, like, does this matter to kids? Like, does this matter to our team? Like, no. So let's just make a decision and move on and go back to something that's going to have a big impact, because what we do is really, truly important. And if we're spending all our time on the things that don't matter, we never get to the things that do. So just always keep that front and center in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, I'll add one thing to that, and I think that it should be appreciate the people that you work with, because I feel like so many times, being good. I 100% agree with you, and from what we were talking about earlier, the kids can taste it. They can taste that kindness and that love that you put into the meals that you're preparing and that you're serving each and every day, and it makes the kids want to come back. But appreciate the people that you work with, because like you mentioned a second ago, I mean, what do we really have to talk about after 10 years? And we know each other, I mean, we know everything about each other. So you kind of get frustrated sometimes with the people that you're the closest with. And I feel like so often we don't appreciate the neighbors that we have, the folks that we're shoulder to shoulder with on the line every single day, Monday through Friday. We tend to underappreciate them, or maybe even take them for granted in some situations. But I just encourage everyone out there to just make this the year of appreciation. Tell someone, I mean, take 5 seconds and just tell them that you're happy that they're there. You're glad to see them. You appreciate the job that they're doing each and every day with the kids, because it makes a huge difference. I mean, we all like to be appreciated. It feels good, and it makes us enjoy what we do more. And ultimately, that enjoyment turns into a smile that you can give back to the kids, which makes them want to come back. So it's a full circle type situation. So that would be my message is appreciate one another.
I love it.
Well, Lindsay, I really appreciate you being on the show today. It's been so amazing chatting with you, getting to learn a little bit more about your background and the awesome work you're doing over at MenuLogic. Tell everyone the URL for MenuLogic. How can they get a hold of you? How can they get more information about MenuLogic? If this really struck a nerve with them and they want to get in touch with you and find out more about what you guys offer.
Sure. You can just go to our website. It's www.menulogic-k12.com, and you can book a meeting right on the website, or you can find our contact information on there too, or you can look me up on LinkedIn, available there too.
And we'll put all of that in the meeting notes as well. So if you look down in the meeting description here for this video, you can just click on the link and it'll take you right over to Lindsay's site. Lindsay, thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate your time today. I know you are extremely busy this time of year, so thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
All right, Lindsay. All right, we'll talk soon. All right, take care.